The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Visit marketingcollege.com to see our courses.
Hello and welcome to the Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. I'm your host, Kiran Kapoor, and coming up on the show, we consider marketing for the arts, theatres, concerts and art exhibitions. We have a review of 3 websites to keep you up to date with marketing information online. But first, we look at how to create digital content. We've talked before in this show about the importance of using social media and online marketing for businesses. But how do you create great online marketing content, something that people will actually want to watch and want to read? My guest is Martin Torts of Matomico.com. Martin, your background is in digital content, and I've actually brought you on to talk about digital content, but I noticed your latest book is called The A to Z of Digital Detoxing.
That's right, yeah.
So are you trying to stop us doing anything online and go and find something more interesting to do?
Well, I'm trying to get everyone to maybe consider what's the right balance between digital and non-digital. It all came about because having worked in the digital industry for about 20 years, trying to persuade people to spend more time and more money online, that I suddenly realised that probably we need to get a bit more balance in our lives. It doesn't take much to look around a restaurant and everyone's sort of ignoring each other and just paying attention to their phones. Someone walked off a pier recently because they were too busy looking at their phones. So, it could be a dangerous business out there with digital. But I think, we all just need a better balance. So I love digital technologies, but I also acknowledge that it can take over your life, and that may not always be the best thing.
So, since we're discussing digital content, shall we start with what actually is digital content?
Sure. I suppose in its broadest sense, it's just content that can be distributed over digital channels. I suppose that's probably the most accurate way of describing it. So that could be written word, it could be audio, it could be video, it could be any of those things.
And are we looking at digital in a social media context or wider than that?
I think one has to look at a little wider than that. Social media is certainly one of the big influences on how content is being shared and distributed. But for a lot of reasons, content is also consumed in so many other ways. So it could be websites, emails, all sorts of different ways. So, we shouldn't restrict ourselves to social media, although, of course, it's had a big impact on people's consumption of content.
You were saying that when people talk about social media, they often overlook YouTube.
Yeah, I find that mind-boggling, really. YouTube, 100 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube every minute. It is a massive place, 1 billion unique visitors a month. You don't get many bigger media properties than that, but when people talk about social media particularly, they seem to get stuck on Facebook and Twitter, and they don't seem to get much further. And there's this massive thing called video, and that is the biggest thing on the web. About 90% of the internet's capacity for content is taken up by video in terms of volume. So it is huge, and I think it should really be right up there, front and centre with people's content considerations.
So if I wanted to produce some video, how would I go about doing that?
Well, it's incredibly easy. That's the most encouraging thing. You can shoot video on your phone much more easily, obviously, than having a full crew there with all the lighting and everything. And to be honest, content of all different types can be justified in different circumstances. And certainly I would think sometimes the less production values on video can actually make it more appealing depending on the circumstances. But people are, I think, very attracted to content that isn't absolutely perfect, unless they're in a cinema or they're watching a cinema film. But for most times they're just looking for human content they can relate to. Content with a few rough edges means that they can get a bit of a grip on it, where if it's absolutely shiny and perfect they just slip straight off it, I suppose, might be one way of describing it. Video's very easy. There are very easy editing softwares such as iMovie and others like that. So I think, as with most digital content, I think people probably spend too long worrying about the execution and not enough time worrying about exactly what the purpose of that video is and what the strategy behind that video is, or that content or any content is. So I think people forget that. They seem to focus mostly on the delivery part.
That's interesting. So you would always advise people taking a step back and say, where are we going with this? What's the point of it?
Yeah, 90% of the time on the question and 10% on the answer, really, is what I would be saying. So otherwise you get... I think that's a bit of a rip-off of a quote from Albert Einstein, but I think it's so true. The question needs to be correctly posed. Otherwise, people may be surprised they don't get enough views, enough visits, enough whatever that they're looking to achieve. And that's often because they haven't really thought enough about what the purpose of that content is and how it's going to work and why it's going to be interesting to people. Because you have to remember there's so much content out there in the digital world. There's no shortage of content, so don't assume because you make it anyone's going to be bothered with it. You really have to think very carefully. And I think there probably is a little bit of a formula for it. If I had to put forward a formula, it would be something like you need to have it needs to be entertaining. So entertaining content that is also potentially useful, and if you can offer the opportunity for participation as well, then you've got a good start, as long as it's relevant to the person to whom you're communicating. But if you get aspects of entertainment, utility and participation, I think those things make up good digital content.
And far more that than worrying about the production values of it.
Exactly, yeah. People are forgive an awful lot. I mean, a lot of people are watching their content on mobile handsets and they're snatching time between going to a coffee or waiting for a meeting. There's very little downtime in terms of digital content consumption, so people will be looking at on all sorts of screen sizes. So people who get hung up on great big production values probably by and large are wasting their time.
So Martin, can I ask you for an example of some good digital content?
One particular example I think that does bring home some of the best lessons on digital content is Oreo, the cookie brand. So I was working on Oreo a year or so ago, and we were creating their Super Bowl ad. And the Super Bowl is the most prime spot of advertising there is in the world, probably. It costs about $3 million for a 60-second spot, just for the air time. And obviously you have to make your advert around that. And we made this, what we thought, and I think is still quite a good ad. It was all about people fighting over whether they preferred the cookie or the cream, and it was all took place in a library, and everyone had to whisper, of course, because they're in a library. So it was quite amusing. But I don't know if people remember what happened, but during that Super Bowl there was a blackout in the third quarter, and that's quite an extraordinary thing to have happened. And in that blackout we happened to have a group of people ready to pounce upon any sort of interesting incident, and they were ready. So they issued a very simple graphic which said you can still dunk in the dark, and a picture of an Oreo in the dark, so basically playing on the fact there's a blackout. And everyone really loved this, and it got distributed hugely and talked about hugely, and actually probably had more reach and impact than the actual Super Bowl TV advert. So it was a real moment of realisation that you don't necessarily need to create these perfectly formed creations to have the biggest impact. There's probably more important values now, such as being relevant, such as being part of a conversation, part of a bigger theme that people relate to, and you go with the momentum of that sort of story, and it can have huge impact. And that sort of ad has now been coined newsjacking, where brands try and jump on the latest story or issue and associate their brand in some way with it.
So Martin, if I decided I wanted to do digital content, where do I start?
Well, I think the best place always to start when one's thinking of communicating is to start by listening. And I would be going online and searching for topics that I think are of greatest interest to my customers and the people I want to communicate with, and spend quite a lot of time finding out where the customers are having conversations, or your target audience is having conversations, and what sort of content they're producing. So that's the first thing to do, is to spend some time listening. And then I'd audit what content you already have, and what you find often is you have a lot more content than you realise, and people are producing content. It just needs to be brought together and collated in some way. And then to consider, well, what is other relevant content to this theme that is out there, and you'd have learned a certain amount of that from listening, because as I said, curating content is as important as creating. In fact, I'd say 70% of the content you probably want to communicate will have been curated by you rather than created by you. So only 30% needs to be created by you. And once you've got that, then you can begin to test some of the content. You can test it in a very low-cost way, and that might be just posting links to content through your current channels. It might be including it in an email newsletter or however you're communicating, and just seeing, well, what sort of click rates am I getting, what sort of response am I getting, is it popular, is it not? And you can learn an awful lot by just looking at that, and then you can begin to reform your content and select content that seems to be more popular, and then begin to build from there and iterate before you need to get into big investments in terms of creating, a studio in your office. And by the way, that's not impossible either, because I've worked with a couple of companies, including the FT itself, in fact, the Financial Times, and they, of course, have the most state-of-the-art facilities, but not when I first started working with them. And, it was very much starting on a low level, and they built up the confidence within the business that this was getting them return. So, yeah, anyone can start with this, and they probably already are to some degree, but you can take it to a new level very quickly, and I think it is one of the most effective ways to market your business.
And one of the things we were discussing was the various uses you can make of video.
Yeah, video is not only hugely consumed and people enjoy consuming it, but it also offers a lot of options that perhaps people don't always realise. People think of video as being a bit like a TV program with a start, a middle and an end, and being just a linear experience, but there's an awful lot of things you can do other than that. You can create interactive video where you can click on elements of the video, you can jump between parts, you can click through even on a YouTube video to a website. You can do lots of different things within a video.
And is that something easy to do?
It is relatively easy to do. There are softwares that one can use, or packages and different methods to allow you to do that. But people don't think about that. Everyone's in this sort of TV mentality in terms of video, and they think you've got to watch it. But people's tolerance for consuming any content is very different, and depends on the circumstances in which they're consuming it. Some people will be prepared to watch a longer form, but other people just want to have snackable bites of content. So allow people the flexibility to get what they want quickly is probably a good lesson.
So this is ways of somebody watching a video and then just wanting to get some more information so they can click through?
Or they might want to click through to a white paper, or to some case studies, or to a website, or some sort of content like that supports the idea. Or they just might want to skip to the part that talks about case studies, but they need to know exactly where to skip to, and you can do all that on the video. You can show people exactly that you want to listen to case studies, click on this part, and you can just listen to those. So you don't need to wade through a lot of content to get to the bit that really matters to you.
Excellent. And if I was to ask you for sort of 3 top tips for somebody wanting to do digital content, what would they be?
I think the first would be redefining your purpose. Why are you doing this? And spending a lot of time on the question, as I say. The second thing is, don't be boring, because there's so much content out there. There has to be a reason people will be bothered with your content. The third thing is probably, don't worry as well that your particular topic might be quite niche, because the volume of content and people out there is so large. There is always going to be a place for your content. However niche, there will be a community of interested in your content. So don't be discouraged if you feel you're a big specialist, and actually spending a time looking at content and listening to other people's content and searching other people's content, you'll find these communities of interest where you can be part of and be part of a relevant conversation.
Martin Talks of Matomico, thank you so much for coming in.
No problem at all.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Enhance your career with Cambridge Marketing Colleges.
Martin, that was great. Thank you for joining me on the show. And now it's the point of the show where we have a review. And this time I'm joined by Charles Nixon, Chairman of the Marketing College. And Charles, I believe you have 3 ways for marketers to keep up to date.
Yes. So the 3 websites that I think are very, very useful for people are, firstly, Online Marketing Trends. This is a curated website from America, but it looks increasingly at good quality market research being carried out by lots of institutions these days on marketing trends.
Charles, just remind me what content curation is. What's this word curation?
The curation aspect is that for much of what we do, we don't produce the original research. So what we're looking at is what in some instances you might have called secondary research historically. And these are for sources of information about your marketplace and your market sector. So you are acting as a librarian, to use one terminology, or a researcher, or in the modern parlance, a curator. And there you're bringing together information which, from your expert knowledge of the sector, are good sources of data, and you are helping your customers and potential customers understand what is the best knowledge about that particular sector. So for marketers, what you're often looking at is what are the latest trends in marketing, especially as we still go through the revolution of mobile marketing issues. So what are most people tending to use their tablet for as opposed to their mobile phone, as opposed to a desktop machine, as opposed to a laptop? What times of day are people using them for different things, etc.? So from a marketer's perspective, you want to keep up with the way in which the marketplace works. And for individual sectors, whether it happen to be things like pharmaceuticals or FMCG or business to business, then you're interested in how those things may vary for sector to sector. So online marketing trends is a particularly useful one because they're creating some of the best information that they can find around, and they produce it in infographic form. So it's fairly easy to digest. It's probably only maybe a few minutes every day looking to see what's going on. And they tend to choose one or two topics a day which they think are important for people to keep up to date with. A second source, which is similar but from a much wider range of sources, is what's called marketing charts. And here this is picking up research that's been put into the public domain by companies such as Experian and major organizations like Adobe. And they're looking at the way in which marketing has been consumed, I suppose is the best term, in various different sectors and industries again. Today's example of that would actually be that Experian's just come out with the latest issue of its very large annual digital marketing review, which looks at the different roles channels play in the customer's journey. So whether they're looking at the people who are looking to buy something offline, but they will still search online, which devices they may use when and for what functions. It's a very interesting piece of research and is one of the updates. Today they're also looking at work of which are the least engaging brands on social media, which is an interesting report because it looks as to why they may be failing to engage. So that's marketing charts. And the final one, which is one of my popular ones, I like very much, though I know we possibly tend to have a different view on this one, is a place called Scoopit. And this is a curation platform which has got tens of thousands of services on it now for all sectors, all types of marketing, all types of activity. And it is a very powerful platform which is free to use and allows you to curate almost any topic that you might want to do. And it provides you with all the information sources for free. I curate a service on there for emerging themes in marketing and professional services marketing, but it can be used and is being used by a very large number of people for all sorts of topics. And the benefit, again, is it's very visual. It uses a lot of infographics, but it also uses a lot of visual images to present the data, and is a very, very simple place to go to follow a particular subject, which then gives you sources of information for you to write about, which then gives you that level of authority in your marketplace.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Visit marketingcollege.com to see our courses.
Charles, thank you very much. That was very interesting. Now, my studio guest today, I need to introduce very carefully. My name is Kiran Kapoor, and my guest is Kieran Cooper. Kieran was previously chair of the Arts Marketing Association and has also been head of marketing at the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, amongst many other arts organisations. Kieran, welcome to the show. Could I start by asking, what is arts marketing?
I guess it's about the promotion of what arts organisations do and attracting audiences for what those are, whether it's selling tickets for shows or getting people to attend galleries or whatever it is that organisation is doing, sets out as its mission. And I've always found it very interesting to see what the differences, both the connections and the differences between, what one might call traditional marketing and marketing the arts. And it was one of the reasons I went to Cambridge Marketing College to do my CIM diploma way too many years ago, was because I was interested in the arts had always worked, and still does, I think, in quite an insular way, and particularly believing that anything to do with the commercial world was somehow anathema and something that should be left behind. Yet what I found once I started talking to other marketers and learning about, sort of standard marketing theory, was that a lot of the things we were doing in arts organisations were actually quite innovative, and particularly the way that we were communicating with our customers and potential customers. So I've always been interested in the link between those two, and I spent a lot of time kind of musing on that and trying to teach people about it too.
So can we explore that a bit further? Because like you, I'm very intrigued by how arts marketing, whether it's different from other marketing, whether it's the same. So clearly the product's a bit different.
Well, yes, not only is the product different, but the relationship between what the organisation's product and its mission is much stronger. As you well know, in kind of commercial marketing, what product the company makes is regarded as one of the first variables in the marketing mix. So you would say if you were a widget company, you would look at your customers, see what kind of widgets they want. If they want ones that are square, you make square ones because that's what you do. That's part of finding a market and fulfilling a market. In the arts, it's different because the product that you put on is much more about what the organisation is there for and much more about doing something because for some kind of artistic reasons. So things that come before the audience. So in some ways, that means that the marketing is completely different because you start with the product as a given, or at least, the core product as a given, and you have to find an audience for it rather than, as you might necessarily do, look at it the other way around in commercial terms. What I found is that you can then start to look at the product in a wider sense. So, when I worked at Cambridge Arts Theatre a long while ago, and we were looking at the things that are not just the show that's on the stage, but the experience, the way that you communicated about it, the whole service that you get both before and after. Those things are as much part of the product as what goes on the stage, and those are the things that the marketer has more influence over. And so that's why I think the arts marketing can get much more interesting, where the overlap with services marketing is quite strong too, because of the way that you're extending the product and looking at all of those elements in the way that you align those to the audience.
And what sort of people do you market to?
Well, there should be a feeling that the arts is for everyone, and that's our starting position. And so I guess that's different from someone who knows that if they're making components for a machine, they're not going to sell those to everybody. The market is much more defined. So our starting point is everybody. But I think every arts marketer and arts promoter realises that there has to be, at least in terms of where you target your communications, you don't have the resources or to be able to speak to everybody in that same way. So you're going to focus on the people who you think are more likely to attend. This is one of the things that I was saying about the arts being innovative. When I was first started out 20 odd years ago, the arts was leading the way in terms of direct marketing because we had ticketing systems that were built around a central customer database. And so we had, in the early 1990s, we had databases with full sort of purchase history. And we were making full use of being able of that to be able to say, okay, well, I want to send direct mail to this group of people who came to this event because I think they're likely to want this event. And so lots of arts organisations have carried that on now. There's a huge amount of database marketing that goes on. Now it's just more complicated because you've got internet sales and lots of people are getting into social listening, so using software to look at what people are saying about their organisation on Twitter and trying to link that back to individuals so that you can use that to enhance the profile of what you have in a customer. So,
I see. So the organisation does the social listening.
Yes, that's what I mean. It's something that's kind of out there. Lots of companies are talking about, but because it starts from that high level of understanding about database marketing in lots of places, it's looking more at that sort of thing and about all the kinds of other big data things that people are talking about, collecting data from multiple points, what people buy when they book in the restaurant, what they might buy in the bar, finding innovative ways to link that down to a particular person, whether you have a kind of subscription scheme so that people have a card that they might use at the bar. You could give them a bit of a discount, but actually, like supermarkets giving you loyalty points, it's about being able to tie those purchases, that secondary spend that isn't necessarily through the box office, to tie that back to an individual, so you can start to segment people not only on what shows they buy, but what else they do when they're in the organisation, when they're in the building.
That's very interesting. So any idea that I might have had that the arts marketing was perhaps a little bit fluffy and just putting on a show and putting a few posters up, you've just blown out of the water. There's obviously quite sophisticated work goes behind it.
I think arts marketers have had to be slightly Janus-like because there is that, I wouldn't necessarily use the word fluffy, but obviously, but the kind of feeling that the artistic feeling, the creative thing that they believe the arts is fundamentally a creative-led industry. So people who make the art are leading the organisations, both in terms of how they're managed, but also, as I was explaining before, the art comes first. So as an arts marketer, you've got to be able to engage in that kind of creative conversation. But most good arts marketers these days are also scientists, and it's that interesting interplay between science and creativity, which I see in all sorts of marketing, particularly marketing communications as well. All the things that grab the headlines and the awards in marketing doesn't tend to be great application of science. It's all about a great advertising catchphrase or some great piece of marketing execution. But I think it's more so that interplay and almost as a kind of it's got to live in permanent tension between the two. And I think that's almost what can make arts organisations more interesting than others, because you're oscillating backwards and forwards between this artistic and scientific.
Kieran, that was absolutely fascinating. Now, if you had some tips for somebody wanting to get into arts marketing, what would you recommend they did?
Sure. I guess like most industries these days, getting in as a volunteer or an intern is really the way that most people end up. I think the majority of people who work in the arts tend to come from some kind of artistic background in terms of what they've studied, although more and more people who've got marketing qualifications are, thankfully, starting to infiltrate, rather than people like me who picked up their marketing, having been appointed to do marketing, then picked up their marketing theory afterwards. So look out for internships and volunteers, but also particularly small groups are often on the lookout for people to help them. So, ones that aren't necessarily constituted as big organisations yet. If you're a student, there's endless opportunities for being able to help promote shows that are going on, particularly in a city like this. But I know also people who have made switch into the arts from working outside, and I think the only top tip is be prepared to earn less.
That's probably very good advice. Kieran Cooper, thank you so much.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Enhance your career with Cambridge Marketing Colleges.
And that's it for the Marketing Review this time. Many thanks to my studio guests. If you would like any more information or you'd like to listen to the show again, then please head on over to star107.co.uk where you can do just that. You're also very welcome to contact the show, and you can contact me via the Cambridge Marketing College's Facebook page or via Twitter at CMC Points of View. I've been your host, Kieran Kapoor. Many thanks for listening, and I'll be back again in 2 weeks' time.
The Marketing Review with Cambridge Marketing Colleges. Visit marketingcollege.com to see our courses.